Hi, this is Teresa Spangler, Future Forward, another episode, and I'm really excited to bring back with us again Lisa Schneider. And she was part of a group before that we talked about times of how to plan for times of uncertainty. But Lisa, you and I, you've got such a great background in innovation and product management, and just an award-winning product strategist. I thought we'd kick off today just looking at 2023, 2022, coming out of COVID, and what the importance of product planning and innovation is as we start to think about we're eventually going to come out of this. So maybe we kick off with just early thoughts on kind of what you're seeing in 2023 and a little bit of anticipation on what you feel like really needs to happen. A couple of points that you see that we're missing and we need to really be thinking about. Could we kick off there?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, good morning, and thanks so much for having me. I'm always happy to chat with you. And I think, yeah, you just wrapped a lot up into one question.
I know.
Look, first of all, I think that often, depending on the sort of type and size and stage of company, right, product management is definitely something that can be underestimated because it's one of those things where people sort of think like, oh, I use products, so I probably know what I want the product to look like. And that's kind of good enough, right? And just like anything else, if someone does it, really well, it could look easy, but it's a lot more complicated than that. And it's also a lot more complicated to really think about this idea of responsive portfolio management, right? Responsive product management, where you are constantly learning and then reiterating not just what you're doing, but your strategy itself based on the learnings. And so I think, if anything, the past couple of years, to your point about what's happening now, I think really reinforce how important it is to build these muscles of, agility, test and learn, responsiveness, innovation, sort of constantly into your practice within your organization, both by having a proper product organization, but also by thinking about these skills as part of your strategic foundation, sort of cross-functionally
Yeah.
across the organization, because it keeps happening. So whenever we come out of this, whatever that looks like, does not mean that these issues will stop happening, right?
Right.
So, okay, we had COVID, now we got to scramble, I got to figure out online ordering and curbside delivery. But now times are a little bit tougher. People are dealing with austerity. And so this practice of like, hey, do I have really good sort of strategic prioritization practices, right? Do I understand how to align my efforts with outcomes? Do
Yeah.
I understand how to rank and prioritize ideas so that it's not just, hey, someone in a really high position had an idea, we're going to scramble and run and do it,
Yeah.
right? How do I think about resource allocation given the resources that I have? And so we could dig into any and all of those things in terms of specific frameworks and practices. But if you don't have all of those things in place, then it becomes very difficult. And then you end up like scrambling or trying something as a moonshot or trying too many things. And as we know, let's do more with less is really a recipe to just, burn people out and not really get to outcomes.
No, I think it's a really good point. And, in terms of the work that we've done, and sometimes we'll go in and put in a product management, a lot of innovation frameworks, but sometimes product management frameworks. The more, I would say, the things that sometimes go missing or not necessarily thought through is that generally a product manager owns the responsibility of that business, that product's business, forecasting, ensuring the sales team has a sales tool. That doesn't mean that individuals doing it by themselves, but generally there might be an alignment with the departments that they have to work with, logistics, the supply chain. All these
Mm-hmm.
things go into that role. Makes for a perfect growth platform into a CEO or the founder of an entrepreneurial organization if you take those learnings and really, build that practice around yourself. So I just kind of want to look at that in terms of what you think from a career-wise, opportunity for people that may be looking at where the best growth opportunities might be.
Yeah. So look, from a career opportunity, I think product has really exploded. And, I look back and I joke all the time that, in the early days in my career, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
I was doing product and that we weren't calling it product.
Yeah.
But looking back, right, product, and then we got a name, and then we got sort of the right, and there were no CPOs, there were no chief product officers.
Yeah.
And then we got this rise of the CPO, right? And like the title first, maybe like 2008, 2010, some real like, digital native companies. But really, I would say from about 2015 or 2016
Yeah.
to about a year and a half ago, there was a 5x increase in CPO job listings
Oh my
on
goodness.
LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Okay. So
That's huge.
that I think says a lot, because as you said, this idea of product being a really strategic role that should be part of the C-suite,
Right.
and B, I talk a lot about, especially when I'm talking to like up and coming, CPOs, brand new CPOs, or people poised for that role, really thinking about how your first team changes as
Yeah.
an executive.
Yeah.
And so you are worried about your vertical, but you need to collaborate very, very closely across the board with different departments. And in fact, that product role and product thinking can be a really great fulcrum for helping the organization balance things like competing goals,
Yeah.
right? So product can say, well, look, these goals, right, they're have an inverse relationship, and so we need to think about and plan for that. Or hey, you want us to drive X, growth, whether it's with product or with sales, well, we need to plan customer success to
Yeah. Yeah.
support that, right? So I can only bring on so many customers for every new CS hire. And so coordinating with the marketing role, right? Hey, if we're going to roll something out, right, you don't want to be playing stakeholder volleyball and just popping that ball over the net to marketing, at the last minute. Here's a thing that we did, I'm going to give it to marketing, and now you run with it, right? Marketing needs to be involved very early on. And so that idea of like discovery and stakeholder management is a really key part, and why products should sit in the C-suite. And I agree, right? Those skills absolutely make CPOs great candidates for CEO
Well,
positions.
and talk a little bit about what you feel like the best skill set is for that role. Like what, you definitely have to be a collaborator. You need the
Mhm.
agility, and the communication skills. But what are any other things that you can say, if you have these skills, you probably could be a very good product manager or product, development, head.
Right. Yeah. Well, look, and I think that there's really two questions here, because one is, here are some skills for product management,
Yes.
right? And then the other is, here are skills for product leadership,
Yeah.
which includes the product management skills and builds on them. And, it's not for everybody. I really like the idea of not having to force people into these management roles, these roles
Yeah.
of like, kind of like high stakes diplomacy a little
Right.
bit, because again, we all have different skill sets. So sort of high level individual contributors, I think, are great roles to have in an organization, right? If you're a leader, thinking about how do we create the opportunity for individual contributors to feel like they're growing in their career, in their compensation, and in their influence, without having to be, a VP or a C-level
Yeah.
leader, because that's a whole additional, right, set
Right.
of skills. But I
Right.
think, certainly in product, right, a tremendous amount of curiosity, right? Why is that doing that? Oh, what
Yeah.
about, I say this all the time, like, oh, that looks interesting. Let me go learn about that, right? So that learning mindset, the way that things are changing. And I would say that combination of both that like high growth, high learning mindset with
Yeah.
low ego and humility, right? You have to be ready to say, I have a hypothesis, and then I went and talked to Teresa, and she was like, oh no, my problem is totally different from what you think it is. Or like, you think I would do this to solve my problem, but that seems like a pain in the butt to me.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing as a product person to be like, okay, that's not going to work, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want to be doing what a colleague of mine once termed as like a validatory research.
Right.
So you've got to be able to find patterns in data, in
Which means you gotta
information.
go deep.
you have to go deep. You have to be able to look at a lot of information, right? It's general market information, it's observations, it's actual data, it's talking to people, right? You've got to be able to integrate a lot of information and figure out, like, what are the patterns here? What am I seeing? What does this mean, right? What's something interesting that this data is telling me? And then how do I execute on that, right? So a lot of times, with product, people are so focused on the like sprint management. Like, that's fine. That's well-trod territory. Like, nobody needs me to talk about that. But I think those qualities and skills, and so that brings us back to the beginning of the conversation, which is, for innovation to exist in an organization, you have to constantly be looking, I did a thing, this thing happened, what does it mean? Right? And create a virtuous loop where that what does it mean brings us back to, does that mean that we should do more of that? And so I talk sometimes about explore versus exploit.
Yeah, I think that's a
right?
really good, yeah.
So like, is what I'm learning telling me this is something I should drill down on, do more of, optimize or extend, right? That's the exploit.
Right.
Or is this telling me, there's something else going on here. We need to go back and learn more, and we need to explore.
Yeah.
And so those sort of are the skills of, I would say, like both higher level product CPOs, but ultimately the foundations organizationally, right, for success in innovation overall. How does that become, not just a thing we're doing about product and reporting on, but a thing we're doing in collaboration across the organization?
So what's the relationship? Let's talk about what kind of a culture the company might need to be to support the product and innovation teams. And what do you see, if any trends or thoughts on how does the CEO need to think about having the culture really foster the need for this product framework and innovation in a company?
Yeah, look, I think the CEO can really, well, but I think the CEO can really set the tone.
Yes.
And this, I'm going to digress a little bit here because it's super, super relevant to us, which is, I think a lot of the qualities that have traditionally been associated with CEOs and with this sort of comfort, are qualities that are actually antithetical to creating innovation, because you need that like high learning, low ego. That has to permeate really the company. It has to come from the top. So you need a leader who's really strong, not just in, IQ and business strategy and experience, but really high in EQ, and really does not have to be, the loudest voice in the room, does not have to have all of the right answers, is okay with someone saying, hey, Lisa, you made a suggestion and I checked it out. I don't think it pans out. Right. And can that leader go, oh, really interesting. Like, maybe show me the data because I want to see, but okay, fine. Didn't pan out. How do we figure out the next thing, right? What's the framework? What's the exploration? How do we figure out the next thing that we are going to check into? So that high level of EQ, the learning mindset has to go all the way up to the top. That safety to say no to somebody senior to you. Those are the things, right? These are not just, I say all the time, we're going to have to stop calling them soft skills, because they foster innovation, right? They make people allowed to experiment and express or say that something went wrong.
And you bring up the prioritization, you bring up, you really are being empowered to take a lot of action. One of the things I find when I'm inside of the companies is there's a gap between what the CEO's expectations might be, waiting for, let's say, not just the product people, but anyone to come to them with the plan. So I'm waiting for the plan, and they're waiting for him or her to ask for the plan. And there's this gap where it just never gets bridged. And so we're, constantly mentoring. It's like, no, you bring the plan to say, I've got a plan. I'd like to share this justification or this plan with you. They're waiting for it 9 times out of 10.
That's right.
So don't wait to be asked for it. I mean, what's your experience with that?
Look, I think that's right. And I think that goes back to sort of what does that safety look like?
Yeah,
So, certainly at the VP or C level, you should be owning and getting ahead of that job, right? You should be making a plan. You should be, again, going and talking to your colleagues, right? You
yeah,
want to do a little like, you want to do a little pre gaming. You don't want to have a culture where everything's offside, but you want to do a little pre gaming, right? Like, hey,
yeah,
Teresa, I was thinking about this before I go present it. Does this make sense to you? Does it cause any red flags? Is there an unintended consequence for your area that
yeah,
I'm not thinking of? So, right, A, take initiative to make the plan. B, take the initiative to collaborate with your colleagues. No one wants a surprise, right?
right.
And you don't want to sit in a meeting and have your counterpart go, hey, you didn't think of this,
Yeah,
right? But then maybe people aren't doing it because they have been so burned
yeah, that's
by
a good
bad
point.
leaders
Yeah,
who, like, if it wasn't their idea, they don't welcome that. But I
yeah,
will also say that this is where, whether it comes from, you as part of the sort of below the CEO C-suite, or you as a CEO, this is where the strategic framework is so
yeah,
important,
yes,
right?
yeah,
You need to have clear, like, mission, vision, strategy, objectives, right? That provides creative constraints for
yeah,
me to come up with a good plan of how we are going to meet those things and deliver that to you, knowing that we're kind of already in the same ballpark. And so that strategic foundational work too is another piece that people skip because they get very excited about talking about tactics and we're going to do a thing,
yeah,
and they
yeah,
skip that framework,
yeah.
and it happens all the time, and it does not set people up for success.
And I feel like if you, and, again, experience, if there's not a framework, there's no clear decision process inside the company.
Mhm.
So you don't know, you might have thought something was decided and you walk out of the room and it really wasn't decided. So I think it's one of those catalysts that helps form what a decision framework is going to look like inside. So you're always clear that what's that next action? You had alignment with the team. Now let's go. I mean, feel like it's so critical.
So, fewer meetings, more executive
Yeah.
summaries. We discussed this, we came to this decision.
Yes.
This was the person that's going to do it. Any questions, speak up.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about agility? I mean, agile frameworks. I know a lot of product organizations and still, especially in the software companies, software as a service,
Mhm.
agile frameworks, but it doesn't permeate throughout the organization. And it feels like some of the organizations that have adopted as a culture have been able to move faster, have these
Yeah.
decision and processes and frameworks. What is your experience there?
So I'll draw a distinction between agile with a capital A, right? And agile with a capital A is the thing that we're doing in the product development space, right? Product and engineering departments together. And we are setting up sprints and we are breaking things into sort of small pieces, and we're trying to figure out, deliverables that we can conduct within 2 weeks, right? And then there are all of these ceremonies, and there are people that get very attached, right? I think it feels like it makes things right or easy for them, right? This is agile here with the capital A. And if we do all of these things, then we're going to be successful.
Yeah.
And they lose sight of the why, right? The purpose, which
Yeah.
is agile with a lowercase a, right? Agile, can we move quickly? Can we respond to things? So
Yeah.
this goes back to that idea of the responsive product management framework that
Mhm.
says, hey, every incremental learning that we get should make us step back and question again, right? More or less of this. Did something change? Are
Right.
we an explore exploit, right? That framework of agility, where we're always questioning and learning, we're always saying, okay, we did a thing, what happened, what does it mean, what changed, right? Inside for us and also outside for our customers.
Yeah.
And again, I would say, like, that example that we all love to bring of, like, oh, we can't go to the restaurant, so how do we get our food, right? But things happen all the time like that. So you're so busy focused, on your business. What changed for your users, right? What changed for your customers?
Yeah.
That sense of, like, I'm constantly talking to customers, I'm constantly assessing market data, it's that constantness,
Yeah.
right? And that willingness to be like, something changed. What I thought isn't true anymore. Like, what I tried isn't right.
Yeah.
That's agility, lowercase a, and that's the difference.
Love that. You did talk about talking to your customers. And one
Mhm.
of the again, I would call this a gap. One of the gaps that are a lot of times frequent inside of companies is we're not having depth of conversations that help influence what our future strategies could be or should be to be there with them for the long term. And, sometimes we're talking maybe to not enough contacts in that company.
Mhm.
So maybe share a few experiences that you have there and any strategies or tips you could share on what's important there, why
Yeah.
it's important.
Well, look, I think, right, what does your customer look like? And so you had mentioned sort of, B2B SaaS as one example. And I'll say that one of the challenges in that area is sometimes your buyer and
Yeah,
your user are not the same person,
right,
right? Or if you're
right,
Coca-Cola, what do your retailers need, and what do the people like actually drinking the product want? So really understanding, what does that customer segmentation look like?
yeah,
Am I talking to, as you said, to all of the people,
yeah,
right? Am I talking to them frequently enough? And then there really is a skill around user research and discovery, where you are asking the right kinds of questions and not asking leading
right.
questions,
It's a big
right?
jump. Yeah,
Not asking leading questions, not asking like super basic questions, right? So it's like, okay, I can get the demographics. That doesn't really tell me anything. And like, we've all seen that meme that goes around that, like, right, Prince Charles, or now King Charles, and like Ozzy Osbourne have the same, like, they're born in the same year in Britain, they're wealthy men, they live in a castle, right? Probably not your same user profile,
right,
actually.
right.
So how do you really understand psychographics, right? And people's emotions and their full user journey? How do you, and then finally, okay, in product, I'm probably doing something about this. I bet
Yeah,
in marketing,
yeah,
someone's doing something about this. Customer service people know stuff.
yeah,
How are you integrating the feedback that you're getting
exactly.
across the organization into a single picture that helps everyone do better?
Right, right. No, I think that is such a key point, is that there is knowledge in every probably facet in every department, and how are you
Right.
aligning and bringing all that data together to really look at it. Plus, you still have to have the conversations. You
That's
still
right.
want those in-depth
Yeah.
conversations. Tell me, because you're so passionate about this area, how in the world did you land to like, this is my spot?
Look, I think that because I started early in this sort of like digital area, I
Yeah,
grew up with it.
yeah.
I think it's really different for folks starting out now. So I'm always happy to share my story. I was an English major. I did not have a plan. I just was an English major because I was a bookworm. It seemed like a really good scam I should get in on to get a degree for reading books.
That is also coming back. I've read that the English major is coming back into college. I mean, people are enrolling to become that. And I just spoke to
Well,
another interview candidate, and they were
yeah.
also an English major.
Well, I'll tell you that there is also research that sort of reading fiction really helps
Yes.
create, right, empathy and understanding and perspective.
Uh,
I will also say that as an English major, what you're tasked with is reading a lot of books and then kind of connecting themes. You
yeah.
know what that prepares you really well for? Finding stories and data.
And you're a storyteller.
Yes.
Yes.
So 100% it's been helpful to me. But, at the time I, kind of graduated and went into marketing, because a lot of English majors went into marketing or PR. But I was working actually at Bridal Guide magazine, right? A small publication.
Interesting. Yeah.
And, we launched our website, our companion website, as it was at the time, and had hired an outsourced company to build this, and then sort of realized that we needed someone to like manage the thing.
Yeah.
And again, right, curiosity, learning mindset, I looked over and I was like, oh, that looks really interesting. I bet you could do some fun stuff there. I think I want to do that.
Yeah.
And so just, started doing it
Yeah.
and started playing with, what you can do and what connections can you make. And I say all the time that human psychology hasn't changed, right? Another literature lesson,
Yeah.
right? If you can get over sort of like the language or the style, if those things are blocks for you, but the stories all make sense.
Yes.
And so at the end of the day, we are trying to do something for someone, right? To help them with a problem or to get them to sort of some outcome. We're trying to help people, and there's human psychology there. So whatever the shiny new tool is that you're doing, I think that's the other sort of really important piece to remember in thinking about innovation as well, which is it's not just, oh, I got to use AI.
Yeah.
Right. And this is always the conversation. I promise you that back in 2008, 2009, I had like people coming to me, we got to build an app.
Yeah.
We got to build an app.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, let's like think about what do we have to offer? How are people using these, new tools of the iPhone or whatever? What would we do there to meet them where they are? Right. And so it's, look, you want to figure out how to help people and then how to use the technology to do that.
Yeah. I love it. So that led you into this.
So that,
this role.
yes.
So
Yes.
would you say it was almost like a special project? You just said, I'm going to do this. I mean, did you sort of step into it, or
I just stepped into it. I mean, it was a small company and we didn't have someone to do it. And I'd sort of been in my role long enough. I had a good team. I was like, I didn't give up my existing role. I just sort of took on this other thing. And I really fell in love with this idea again, that you could like experiment and that you could do new things. And so look, some of the things that we did then maybe don't sound so exciting now, but like, we had a Bride of the Year contest, and it was purely an editorial contest. Readers wrote in, they got an incredible truckload of prizes, and they were featured in the magazine. And, at the time, this seems sort of groundbreaking. Like I said, now it doesn't, but it was like, oh, okay, what if editorially we narrowed it down to 3, put them on the website and had users vote, right? Now, again, that was an early days thing. Doesn't sound like much now, but it was the mindset of like problem solving. How do I engage my audience in what it is that we have to offer with the new technology? That problem solving set, right? That was what really hooked me. And I think that's why I progressed very quickly to senior roles, because as we said, right, it's much more about that kind of problem solving level and not just can I run the agile sprint?
And that sort of self-initiative that you directed yourself into these areas. We loved when we hired other team members on. One of the things that we kind of watch for, and we tell them, lean in. You have permission to lean in. So we love to see how, young talent or new hires or our new partners, how they lean in. And, out of that, we've come up with just some incredible new, opportunities, new products, new services. I think that lean in effect is something not to be afraid of. And sometimes it's hard because you've got so much on your plate. That management, and maybe there's some tips there that you can share. How do you manage the day-to-day with, this is kind of really cool. If I just lean in here, maybe there's some opportunities that could open up.
Yeah. I think we tend to discount our own time.
Yeah.
And so we need to be as rigorous with sort of, I talked about that product prioritization, right? Or strategic prioritization, right? Okay, we're going to spend X% of our time here. Now I know for this initiative, I have 25% of our resources. Now I'm going to figure out how do I sort of prioritize those 25% of resources, but I've got sort of a strategic allocation there. Well, you need to do that for yourself, right? You need to treat yourself and your career almost like a product.
Yeah.
And you need to say, hey, I'm blocking out X hours on my calendar. And, I was coaching someone last year and he said, well, I do that. But then someone says, can I meet with you? So I give up the time. And I was like, well, you just devalued your own time. I said, if you were meeting with a client, would you have just given up the time? He was like, of course I wouldn't have. Don't just give up the time, right? That is really important. Block that off, whether it's deep thinking, slow work, innovation, right? Figuring out how am I going to talk to other people? How am I going to get this idea up the chain, right? Mark off time for that and take that really seriously.
I think that's beautiful. I worked with the Tom Peters company early in my career, and I don't know if you remember or if you even know who he is. He's kind of one of those of my generation, but he had a program called You, just Product You. And it was designing you as the product to get you out there. And it's
Yes.
very, very thoughtful. And
I
I
love that.
I do too. I agree with you. If we think of ourselves as that product, how are we promoting ourselves? How are we showing up? How are people perceiving us?
That's right. How are you giving other people an
Yeah,
excellent user
yeah,
experience?
yeah,
That's right.
yeah. So I
Yeah.
love that point. So it's a good reminder to people to think of themselves as a product. And we talk about it in terms of branding, brand you, but
Mm-hmm.
we're not necessarily talking about it as you are the product. So if you sat down and built your strategy, your personal strategy
Yeah.
as to how am I get this product out there, you probably could have the success you really want. So I'm
Yeah.
projecting, but that's my thought.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. And again, I think, look, it's not that this is the newest thought. It's that, again, human nature being what it is, we need to hear it over and over, right? I think it's worth
True.
saying out loud here on
Yeah.
this podcast and in other spaces and reminding people
Yes.
to do those things and to make that time.
Well, so looking at again the remainder of 2023 and 2024, are there some trends that you're seeing and or things that you think executives, leaders, all of us should be thinking about? Where do you see some of these trends headed? Can you
Yeah.
conjecture
Well,
there?
yeah, no. So look, I think first of all, certainly in sort of the right, not large enterprise company, a lot funding looks really different
Yeah.
now, which
Yep.
means that strategies need to look really different. And I have to say that even sort of back, this is also back in the like, I'm gonna say 2016, 2017, there was this huge rush to like get the users and figure out how to monetize them later.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so you had companies that were like getting a ton of VC money for customer acquisition, even if it was at a loss.
Yes. Yeah.
And I used to look at that and go like, I'm the odd man out here. I don't understand this. This is not a sustainable business strategy. You're hoping that you figure it out later, right? You know, and again, it's like, listen, every industry has its trends. Like everyone's hopping on this trend. And what's really clear now is this trend is over,
Yeah.
right? This trend is
Yeah.
over. You need a sustainable business strategy. You need to figure out how to get customers, again, it's product market fit, right? How to
Yeah.
get customers that will pay for what you're offering in a way that is sustainable, right?
Right.
How to not spread yourself so thin on so many initiatives that you need, you know, like a lot of people kind of doing things that may or may not come to outcomes. How do you have that, right, that responsive portfolio management so that you're constantly reassessing and you don't go too far
Yeah.
along, right, in the plan? So I think really that rethinking of what it means to be a successful business, what growth looks like,
Agree.
that to me is something that has really kind of come out now in the past months with the economy the way it is and funding the way it is, and really resetting people's idea of what strategy and growth looks like, and not sort of overspending because you'll just get money at the next round. So kind of back to more basics.
Do you think we're learning anything so that we don't keep
Do
repeating
it again.
rubber band? I know it's, it is just the rubber band, go, go, go when times are good. And consumers and businesses have money to spend. And then all of a sudden we are going to be very conservative in all of these testing things that we were doing. We didn't prioritize necessarily. We're just
Right.
out there. So what are your thoughts on that?
Look, I hope that there are some leaders that are taking this as more foundational guidance.
Yep.
So
Agree.
that going forward, there's a balance, right? You certainly don't need to be so parsimonious that you're acting as if you're in austerity measures when you're not.
Yeah.
But I hope that some of the learnings will stick, and I'm sure there will be people for whom it won't. But I hope that some of the learnings stick, and that there is some balance.
Yes. Yeah. I
Yeah.
totally agree. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about what you do for fun. How do you keep your own psyche healthy?
Yeah. So, well, one thing that I do is I take a walk first thing every morning. And I started doing that after some months of the lockdown and working at home, because my office is right next to my bedroom. And it's like, oh, okay, let me like roll right on in and not leave the house. And, you know, it sounds like such a small thing. And apparently it's a huge thing. So I spoke to a guy who is a human light interaction specialist.
A human life
Light,
light. Okay.
light interaction. So how does your body interact with
Oh,
light, natural
okay.
light, right? Different kinds of artificial light. And it turns out that for your energy level, circadian rhythm, longevity, disease prevention, getting exposed to natural daylight first thing in the morning is one of the best things that you can do.
Ah, that's very
So
impressive.
yes.
Yeah.
So, I just get outside
Yeah.
and do that every morning. Um, I'm one of the lucky people that likes to exercise. It's a good stress release for me, and I sort of like feeling strong or
Yeah.
limber, whatever. And I still love to read, and I have 2 kids, so I'm busy running around with them. Um, but I like what I do too.
Yeah.
So
You can tell. I mean, your
yeah,
passion for it definitely comes through. Are you a journaler?
I'm not.
No.
I'm not a journaler. I mean, my mind's like constantly running. I'm sort of I'm not a meditator because my
Yeah.
mind just thinks. But no, interestingly, I'm not a journaler.
Okay.
I take a lot of notes, right? When I think
Yeah.
things, I take a lot of notes for ideas,
Yeah.
and I capture a lot of articles. But I'm not a journaler.
Okay. Do you have an idea journal or idea log?
It's
I like to
I have
kind of
probably
get into,
several. Yeah,
yeah. So you
there's
have,
probably
yeah.
several different formats. Sometimes I send my own self a Slack message. I have a Google Doc. I save
Yeah.
things in Pocket. So, there's things scattered in a bunch of places.
What's your favorite app?
Oh gosh. Um, I would say my favorite app is probably the Kindle.
Okay.
Um, because I do have sort of like the reading is just a great escape for me.
Yeah.
And if I'm traveling, I went into the city last night for a meeting, and instead of like taking a book, or I can't really do work on the train, then there's no signal and it's whatever.
Yeah.
And so if I have a Kindle, I've really got sort of a ton of stuff to read at my
Yeah.
fingers all the time, and that could be fiction, that could be work,
Yeah.
right? It could be business books, things that you're using to build your skills and keep up with things. But that's probably my favorite.
Okay. So is there a positive outlook that you see for the US, the world? What's that positive outlook thing that you would share with people that you see? I mean, because I think we talked about it, the doomsday news headlines sometimes bring people down, but there's a lot of really good
Yes.
things going on.
Yeah. So look, I think we're in, not to sound terribly trite, but we are in a period of epic change.
Yeah.
And that is hard. Like,
Yes.
I just want to acknowledge that that is hard. And the thing to do, I think, is to look back historically and understand what happens after periods of epic change.
Yeah.
So, if anybody saw the movie Hidden Figures, which was about 3 Black women that worked at the NASA space program. So one of the characters she was the unofficial, because racism, supervisor for a group of women, and the women were called computers because they did longhand computation. They did like incredibly complex math, right? Brilliant women doing incredibly complex math. So she walks down the hall, sees they're breaking the wall. It's like very dramatic. They're literally breaking the wall to get this massive IBM like mainframe computer into the room. No one knows what to do with the thing. So she goes to the library, takes out a book that she also has to quote unquote steal from the white section because also racism, but takes out a book, learns like Fortran, right? Learns how to program,
On her own.
walks into the room where the men are like humana, 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 da 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 da, right? Marches back to her office and says, "Ladies, here's the book. We're going to have jobs."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's hard. You're going to have to learn to do something new and different. Things will change.
That goes back to the curiosity now.
Mm-hmm.
If we each have that curiosity and that
Yeah.
hunger, that growth mindedness,
Yes.
tackle this change
Yes.
in the best way that you can absorb what's going on. I totally agree.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy too. I love that
Yeah.
movie. It's great. Great.
Great movie. Great movie.
Yeah. Well, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to cover? Make sure that we get it out there.
I mean, I think this has been great, and I think, you know, if I would kind of recap, I'd say, right, starting with strategic foundations, making sure that, you know, as a leader, as an organization, that you are identifying, right, what is going on and what is it that we need to do? What does that vision look like? What are the outcomes? How are we going to measure those? That really, those creative constraints actually empower people to come up with really good ideas and hypotheses and tests that would drive to that outcome. And then creating that habit and that model throughout the organization of that test and learn mindset and that constant reiteration, right? And sort of that EQ of like, hey, what could we learn? How do we join all of our things together? Making sure that the incentives you set up in your organization are, I wrote a LinkedIn post on incentives, right, that often backfire.
Yeah.
So how do you really think through, am I setting up the incentives that encourage, right, learning, pivoting, and collaboration?
Which it goes to say, and you brought it up, you need new habits. It's hard to break old habits.
Yeah.
So you know, build that transition plan so that you're building the right kind of habits and encouraging the behavior that you know the future company needs today.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
right.
Lisa, thank
That's
you.
right.
It's been wonderful
Thank
to have
you.
you again. Love talking to you, but we'll have you back again, I'm sure.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Thanks,
Right.
Teresa.
Then
Bye.
you have me. Well, stop.